Hello, everyone. Welcome to the PressPlay Inspired Podcast. It's a podcast that does interviews with inspirational people, as well as custom content monologues on topics to help our listeners, that's you, find the resources, tools, and support that they need to be their best inspired self. Today, we are very lucky to have a new friend of mine named Erin to be here with everybody. Hi, Erin.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Erin and I just found out we live like less than an hour away from each other. So,
I know.
So crazy.
I was creeping you on all your previous podcasts, so that's how I found that out.
That's good. No one creeps nearly enough. They should tell you.
I know. We do. We need more podcast creepers in our lives, don't we?
I definitely, get those listen rates up.
That's right.
So would you like to introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about you and your company?
I would love to. My name is Erin Sadler. I run a company called The Rooted Family. What it does is it helps families, schools, and community grow strong roots, hence the name The Rooted Family, of social emotional learning skills, mindfulness, and then what I call the 7 brain boosters. So I incorporate I'm a brain health coach as well as an educator. I sort of went through all the research of the brain and figured out what are those life skills you need to wire your brain to be successful and happy. I have 3 kids of my own. I went through my own mindfulness journey. And when I saw the statistics for our kids today, it, to be frank, scared the bejesus out of me. And I didn't want my kids to be a statistic. So I really dug in and I said, if I have to help these kids and I look at the brain research, what can I do as a parent to help them not have all the issues we're seeing with kids? And when I go in and I teach this to teachers and I teach this to parents, they're always shocked by what I show them a little diagram of what a kindergarten statistic carpet looks like. And parents are always shocked. When I go and give this to corporations, they're always shocked. But the people that are not shocked are the teachers. The teachers are always like, yes, that is what my carpet of kids looks like. And it does not matter. Statistically speaking, the demographics do not matter. I mean, there's some variation within your demographics, but I'm telling you, the ACEs test, Adverse Childhood Experience Survey, spans all of the demographics. So my goal in life is to take the brain research, mindfulness, social emotional awareness, and teach kids how to do it in a fun, inspiring way, and teach parents how to do it in a fun, inspiring way.
Well, isn't that inspiring?
Yeah, thank you.
We use that word a couple times, might not. I should research more as well. I didn't realize that. So I have a child on the autism spectrum, and so very brain related stuff. So I've spent a fairly significant amount of time doing brain research on autism and dementia, and some really interesting correlations there. So I love that you've sort of taken it to that next step and said, okay, now I understand it. This is an opportunity that I can use to educate others to being able to make a change in their life. So that's awesome. Yeah.
Well, and I think for 2 reasons. One, the research shows that when children understand how their brains work, they're much more enlightened to change their patterns of behavior. And because that is when they are wiring their brains for success in those early formative years, that's the time when we really need to teach them those skills. And sort of what you were saying related to dementia, some of the things you teach kids at the preschool, kindergarten, 1st grade level, and then going in upper elementary when their brains are pruning, those will have an effect on the onset, on the adult life. So we can help kids wire their brains from the beginning. We set them up for such success in life.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree there, because you kind of age in reverse as you get to those types of illnesses, and you keep what you learned first.
Right.
So if we keep that in mind, then we have some work to do on the front end education so that we keep some of our skills that are paramount to our success, like as soon as we possibly can process them, of course.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's great. And, I never thought of it that way, but I had a conversation in the car with my 13-year-old, and it was sort of kind of how, I call it the lizard brain and the logic brain. So we have things that the we just do.
Yeah, your primitive brain.
Breathe, right?
Yeah.
And then we have things that we think about doing. And
Right.
so we had this conversation about some emotional things she was struggling with. And after I gave her sort of my lizard logic limbic system kind of conversation, she was like, that helps so much. Now I don't feel like I'm crazy. I don't feel like I did something bad. I understand why I'm confused. And so I think we underestimate the ability for our children to comprehend complex topics. We just have to reframe how we deliver it, maybe, which is your area. I'm not sure if that's.
Yeah. Well, that's what I do. And that you are 100% correct in there. When I go in and teach growth mindset to kids or resiliency, and I do it with this Yeti puppet. It's like a giant Yeti, and the baby Yeti gets left behind from his family. And so the kids actually have to brainstorm ways to help the Yeti because the Yeti isn't willing to try. So they actually become the motivators, and they are the teachers for the Yeti about how to get back up the mountain. And they come up with creative problem solving ways. But then we wrap that back around to your brain. And when I show kids the inside, I have a diagram of the brain. Here's what your brain looks like when you try something and you get it right the first time. And there's very little activity because your brain knew what to do. And then I show them what your neurotransmitters are doing in your brain when you try and you fail, but you have the mindset to try again. And I show them how lit up the brain is because the brain loves to solve a puzzle. And I can't tell you how many kids, it changes the way they look at learning and the way they see failure. And then they're not scared to fail anymore because they say, whoa, my brain actually, I taught my brain a lot more in that moment. And to hear teachers then who have had the kids go through the program, or parents who I've coached in the Rooted Family Circle come back and be like, they're willing to try. They're not giving up anymore. They're not saying, too bad, so sad, I don't want to do it. They know that they're helping their brain. So I think it's huge. I teach preschool. I started my own school, and I teach kids about neurons and neurotransmitters and what makes the brain happy. And they understand it. They get it. I mean, at their level, but they understand what it takes to make a brain happy.
Yeah, I love that. I think the kind of idea of failure as it's not really, it's feedback, right? Failure is feedback.
You got it.
And if we frame it that way when we're teaching our children, that it's not this thing to be ashamed of, but actually to aspire to, even.
Right.
It allows them more freedom to be creative and stay creative, right?
100%. And I think as teachers and as parents, because the rest of the world gives the opposite message. So when we're parents and teachers, we have got to be deliberate and intentional with that messaging, that the process is more important than the product, because the rest of the world only shows you the product, and that's what's important. So they have to get that messaging from us as their role models so that they do actually take that into consideration when they're trying new things.
Oh, I love that. So another thing that I thought I heard you mention, I actually study focused awareness meditation technique.
Oh, yeah.
From Dr. Susan Taylor, who's studies like a Himalayan version of meditation.
She does.
And it's very focused on mindfulness. So I'm curious, how do you integrate your mindfulness practices into the Rooted Family paradigm?
So the way, to me, when I showed the picture of our tree, the Rooted Family is, the mindfulness component of the Rooted Family is sort of the inside the tree, sort of the roots that are taking up the nutrients of the soil. It's sort of the way in which we can open our brain up. So when we talk to kids, when they're having emotional issues or they're having meltdowns or frustration flare-ups, and we show them that those two parts of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, your logical thinking skills, and your amygdala, your emotional response center, if you are having flare-ups, you're not allowing that prefrontal cortex to do all the thinking it can. But one of the best things you can do to open that pathway back up is to breathe. So teaching kids how to breathe. And one of the things I enjoy, the challenge my brain enjoys the most, is having that kid that comes to me and says, like, I've tried breathing, I'm not doing it. Or that parent who says, we've tried mindful breathing in our house and it doesn't work. My kid won't do it. And then really, to me, that's like challenge accepted. So that's my whole my whole goal is to find what that child loves and to teach them how to do it. And I have had kids come into me and be like, I'm not doing it, open their mindset. And by the time they're done with the program, they're doing guided meditations on the carpet and they're able to regulate their emotions. It's that children, if they have not done this, they don't know what that peaceful, centered feeling is. So once they've practiced and they understand that, and that's just that consistency and repetition. When I started doing mindfulness, my monkey brain was all over the place when I was doing meditation. And I remember thinking like, this is probably not for me. I know all the research, but it's not for me. And so I really grasp that when I'm teaching kids, that they have that uncomfortable feeling. It's uncomfortable at first, but that there's another side. So conversing with them and letting them know emotionally, you will get to another place. And then when they feel that peaceful, contented feeling and that they know that they are empowered to control their emotional state, it's a game changer. And then they crave that feeling. So when I teach parents, I'm always like, it's got to be a consistency and a repetition in us modeling for our kids. So it's one of those things, just like you want your kids to eat healthy, that's a continuous thing you're always teaching your kids how to do. So is regulating emotion and understanding that breathing can be a huge, huge component to helping kids learn that.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I completely 100%. I literally had a similar an experience, and I don't teach this actually. I just live as part of how I choose to live my life. But my 10-year-old son, he's always flipping, right? This kid is just nonstop movie.
Yes.
And I was in my room meditating, and he came in, and I stopped because I have a preference of children first. And he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, mommy's meditating. I'm just trying to give myself a little balance here. He's like, can I try that? And I'm like, sure. And he made it like a minute. And then he was like, oh, I failed. I'm off. And I was like, dude, you sat for a minute.
Yeah.
And I think we forget, especially people in the community, the mindfulness and meditative community, no one started out being a monk and meditating for 8 hours a day.
Right.
If you do it every day, but a minute, it's better than you doing it one day for 5 hours.
100%. And I always call it my minivan of mindfulness. I always say, if you are having one of those days, just do it at the stoplights when the light turns red. And my kids know too. Carpool drop off is a place where I need mindfulness the most, because that is a crazy There's always kids and people are not paying attention, and I'm having an internal heart attack that somebody's going to get hit by a car. And I started in the driveway when I get in the car, and my kids are, oh, there she goes. She's starting the breathing. But then one day, my daughter, who had been waiting for me in the car and was feeling frustrated because I was doing mom stuff inside, and I walked around and she was breathing in the car, and I was like, oh, what you doing? She goes, well, I was really frustrated because you took so long to get out here. So I just started really deep breathing so I wouldn't be angry when you got here. And I was like, I took a victory lap around the minivan. I was like a Rocky style victory lap. Like, she gets it. She felt the frustrated feeling. She stopped herself so she wouldn't be upset with me when I got there, and she regulated her emotion, and we had a very lovely day. So it was wonderful. So
that's great.
I think that role modeling to kids, even in those small moments, makes a huge impact on them trying it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, and just because it's a hot button for me, is, I have a daughter on the autism spectrum. And so people make this assumption right away that like things won't work for them, or not traditional things. Well, do you know?
Right.
Did you try? And actually, one of the few things that sometimes my daughter can use to sort of get herself in a good place is she'll breathe to 10. Like and it's her way, and that's perfect. But it's literally the only way sometimes, if she doesn't have a support like one of us, that she can get to a place where she can think instead of react. And so I think that it's a technique modifiable to whomever you're working with at whatever level they're working with. So I love that it's part of the, the nutrition in your tree that allows the all of the growth.
Yeah. And I think I think too, parents and teachers, when I go to talk to them, exactly what you just said about everybody's, as long as they're getting the benefit and they're feeling that calm feeling, that's what we want. I think so often when I talk to parents, they're like, well, I don't know how to teach meditation. I don't know. And I'm like, it is breathing. I mean, it is. And so that's what I want to convey to people, that this is not something, it's going to look different. Some kid's going to love making animal breathing, and another kid's going to love to be in a quiet place by themselves and they can handle it themselves. And another kid's going to need you to wrap that into snake breathing and show them how to do that, or up and down the fingers. Every kid needs a different way, and every kid's going to need something different at a different time. They're kids. Their attention spans sometimes are flip it and go back and forth. So you got to sort of have a fresh thing ready to show them, ready to expand their horizons.
Oh, I love that. So you talked about 7 brain boosters. Is there any way to sort of give like a quickish?
Let me tell you, girl, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is so cool. So Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and UCLA is a huge one. We have the Center for Healthy Minds here at UW-Madison, which is amazing. Sometimes I get giddy thinking I live that close to that center. But here's what the research has shown about what makes a happy, healthy brain. So kindness, gratitude, creativity, courage and growth mindset, respect, responsibility, healthy eating, and healthy exercise. If you have a consistent active practice of those nutrients in the soil, statistically speaking, and through the research they've done, you will have a happy, healthy endgame where you feel content and peaceful. And studies show that you will have success in life. And the really crazy thing is Yale and Harvard have run studies that show they can predetermine, based on your emotional intelligence skills in kindergarten, what you are going to do when you are an adult based on where your skill level is, which is why this is so important to teach kids from a very young age when they're wiring their brains, because you are literally setting the neural pathways for them. So when you do these consistently with them, you are changing the trajectory of their lives, which is so cool. And I think before I knew all this, I always thought, really, they can really tell you based in kindergarten how you're going to be when you're adult, whether you have a propensity for drug and alcohol addiction, whether you have a propensity to be incarcerated, whether you have the propensity to have a mental health disorder in kindergarten. But now that I know how all the neurological wiring works, I'm like, I don't know how you wouldn't say that that was the way it was going to go. Because it's like driving a car down a road. The first couple times you do it, it's a little bumpy and you don't know where you are and you're paying attention. But when you've done the same behavior pattern over and over again, that goes into your subconscious of your brain, and that becomes part of your belief system and who you are. So if you do kindness and gratitude and you teach your kid growth mindset skills, that becomes the super highway that they just naturally take. On the other end, if that's not what they get and they have trauma, or they're being told that they're not great at things all the time, that becomes their belief system. And then to try and get the car to steer in the other direction, you can totally do it because of neuroplasticity, but it's going to be like being in a covered wagon on a bumpy road the first couple times until that becomes the new superhighway, which is why as grown-ups, it's so much harder for us to overcome our habits that we've had for years and years. That's why so many people don't do well when they start a new eating plan or what they consider a diet, because those old pathways pop up unless you're really intentional about carving a new pathway and you consistently repeat it and stick to it.
It's interesting that I'm from a completely different area of research and specialty on my end. They're able to determine if a child is on the autism spectrum because it's a different wiring of neurology after the age of 2. And the reason is after the age of 2 is when the rest of the brain has had an opportunity to form, right? That's when their speech is able to be formed, right? And so the big thing in the autism community is early intervention, specifically for all of the things that you just said, between the ages of 2 and 5 or 2 and 6, which is the only amount of time that there's evidence-based protocols supporting rewiring of the brain for little humans, right? Like complete rewiring, not just rehabitizing. That's your window, right? So if you're a child who's neurologically divergent is treated with love, kindness, and gratitude during that period, their ability to have more successful outcomes that were so society accepted is so much higher than if we realize that they're divergent at 8 or 9 or 10. And,
100%. Yeah, because at 8 or 9 or 10, instead of growing the neurological connections, you're in the pruning state. So so then your brain is starting to choose those pathways and just replicates those pathways in the brain, and whatever isn't used then falls off, pruning like pruning of branches. But in that window of time, that 2 to 6 or 7 years old, that's just a time of huge growth. And one of the coolest things that I tell parents is we're on totally different brain wavelengths than those kids, for good reason. They're in a theta brain wavelength state and we're in beta. So ours is like where we feel stress and in more social and go back and forth. Theta is actually a meditative state. So that's how young kids are able to absorb as much information. Nobody hands us a big old manual when we're born and we're like, here's how you do life. Read this, and then you'll know it. They have to absorb that, and they do it by being in their environment. The other end of the spectrum, when you're in a meditative state, that's also when your parents are like, it's time to clean up, it's time to clean up, it's time to clean up. And they literally do not hear you because they are so ingrained in their play. It's almost like, and then you do talk and you get a really crabby response. I always tell parents, that's like you're waking somebody walking into your room in the morning and ripping the covers off of you and telling you to get up. It's like they just woke you up of a dream-like trance. It's why your kid can rock being a unicorn for 75 days in a row. And they really believe they're a unicorn because they have that dream-like state, which is so amazing. And what we're seeing in schools and in kids nowadays is that stress and the pressure and taking play out of their environment is pushing them into beta before they're supposed to, which is so detrimental on so many levels. It starts the stress response that much earlier for kids, but also they're not given the opportunity to use all that absorption level of brain wavelength that they could be using to absorb knowledge and learning. And we're asking them to switch their learning mode in a way that they're not ready for yet.
It's almost like we're circumnavigating their osmosis time, right? They don't get to absorb.
Yes.
Yeah, we broke them because we're all in a hurry to get nowhere. It's fun.
Right. Well, and thinking that we're getting further along when we're actually doing ourselves a huge disservice. Yeah. We're actually making it harder for everybody and damaging how they're wiring their brains in the process. Yeah. Or limiting, I guess.
Yeah, I think, or they're being wired different than intended.
Correct.
Yeah, they're not getting
optimal levels. Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow, this has been amazing and it went so fast.
Oh my gosh, it did go fast.
I know. Great conversations go fast.
Yeah.
So how can families that are interested in the Rooted Family and the things that you're doing, like what are a couple things you're doing? How can they contact you? That kind of wrap up of that nature.
Awesome. So they can visit me at therootedfamily.com. That's where I will be. I have after listening to this, if you think, wow, I need more of that, because we need to just not say kind is nice. Kind is actually different than just being nice. Same thing with grateful. Grateful's different than just having kids that say please and thank you. It's a whole different level if you want a brain change. So I was having so many people say, like, I wish you lived closer to me. I wish I could see you here. So I made a whole online community called the Rooted Family Circle. It's a monthly membership in which I give you, the parents, the information you need about the brain in a short little video. I do a brain explain for your kids, and I Mary Poppins it up, and there's birds and whatever the critter is for that month floating around my head that explains to the kiddos how the brain works. And then I have family journals, activities for family, dinner questions that you can ask around the table that connect with whatever that nutrient in the soil is for that month. So coming up soon, we're going to be talking about navigating your North Star, setting goals, teaching parents and kids how to set family goals and individual goals and how to actually attain them. And then we move into like how do we grow confidence in our kids? And so all of that. And then if you're still interested in the gratitude aspect, I have Be Grateful, which is our online gratitude program that we offer for families too. And it's all games and fun stuff that you can do as a family together.
Oh, that sounds amazing. So in the description of the podcast, we'll be sure to put a list and links to all of the available resources. Well, absolutely. One of the best ways to be your best inspired self is to know that you're able to help your children be their best self too. And so I appreciate so much all of the time and energy and research that you've put into these solutions that you're sharing with families. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Oh my gosh, I feel so grateful to be on. Thank you, Jackie. It's so nice to meet you. And I'll catch you for coffee soon.
We should. We're too close to not have coffee together.
You got
All
it.
right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll sign off and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.